Caro, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Whatever time of day it is when you hear this message, I pray that your mind, your heart, your body, and your soul are all poised to receive, to accept, and to respond to words of wisdom. Some years ago, a friend of mine introduced me to the definition of a hero. He says, the hero is the one who remains standing when everyone else sits down. The hero is the one who maintains his position when everyone else takes a step back. And when I look at the circumstances of Africans in America today, I can see why there are so few heroes. When you look at how we're doing in terms of health, how we're doing in terms of the wealth gap, in terms of our relationship to the legal machinery of the country, from the street to the courthouse, when you look at our educational standing, you look at the health and the vitality of our families. You could go on and look at pretty much any set of statistics, and it's pretty conclusive that we're losing horribly. Like we're getting dogged right now. It's a very bleak situation, and it brings to mind something that Dr. Claude Anderson told us years ago, which was if we didn't change our behavior, African Americans were flirting with being locked into a permanent underclass status, which would mean that we would be sort of untouchables as a caste. And typically what I find when our people face that reality, when they really start looking at the numbers, they really start doing the logical calculations and assessments on what it means to be behind in all these different areas of human activity, usually people will resort to like three different responses or reactions. We've been conditioned to blame. We deflect. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. It's not our fault. It's not our fault. And we blame from, the white man down to some people, we start to blame each other. It's the black man's fault. It's the black woman's fault. It's the kid's fault. Like we just blame. With no real understanding of why we're blaming. Okay, what happens next? If you can blame everything on one of us or the other, then what? We never get to that. Another common reaction to our reality check is this martyrdom, right? And we paint ourselves in this picture that the more we suffer, the more humanity we're supposed to be bringing out in the world or something. I don't know. I really don't know. But somehow we have been conditioned to believe that we're martyrs, and the world will be better when they do right by us. Which is nonsense. But still, it's a conditioned response. Another response that I find is very typical to the reality is that people play the super victim, right? Nobody got it worse than me. And yes, I said nobody got it worse than me. That's the whole thing. You got to be as pitiful as you possibly can. Nobody got it worse than me. And you start, there's a race to the bottom. You should start hearing. You get 3 or 4 of these folks together, man. They will tell you generations of plight in an attempt to prove that nobody got it worse than me. And I understand all of those stances. I truly get it. There's some benefit to playing the super victim. You're going to get pity. You're going to get attention. And you're going to get some conditional favor, right? As long as you're willing to play the role, then the people who are in a position to do so will give you the attention and they'll coddle you and they'll pander to you and they'll parade you around, at will. But the thing that you got to know about that, if you're going to play that role and you're going to walk that path, listen, the people who pander to your weakest character and the people who pity you are only going to allow you to do well enough to make them feel better. They're never going to do enough to help you do better than they're doing, or even better than they think you ought to do. The moment you start to do better than they think you should do, or you do better than them, even worse, then you're going to see all of that pity turn to extreme animosity. They'll turn on you in a nanosecond. Okay? I've been there. I've done that. I've seen it play out many, many times. And as a matter of fact, you can see it playing out today. I don't want to go and, name people, because they're my own people. But you understand. You can start looking around and see people who try to play both sides of the equation. It never works out in their favor, right? I'll give you one example that's very interesting that just kind of indicates. The NAACP just had their first, their first black head in the history of the organization. And how can the NAACP, that's dedicated to our people, have never had a black head until the 21st century, right? It just lets you know that this is an organization that has been designed to maintain a certain status quo, while at the same time presenting, us as the poster child for benevolence and fairness and all this kind of stuff. But more importantly, what I want to drive home is how that whole attitude and that kind of a way of life is totally contradictory to Orisha lifestyle. That may have been suitable for other kinds of lifestyles, but for Orisha lifestyle, that's not how we live. It's not our objective. The objective of Orisha lifestyle is to capture for the modern human being the virtues of traditional culture, so that you can attain supernatural powers, so you can attain a supernatural status, okay, so that you can rise above the everyday mundane reality and become a part of eternity. This is something that we see articulated super clearly in Ejogbe. The Holy Odu Ejogbe tells us, Oromila said it is human beings who become Orisha. Ifa knows that it is human beings who become Orisha. Ifa said Oduduwa, who you see, was once human. When he did good on earth after his death, we always remembered him. Oromila said it is human beings who become Orisha. Ifa said that it's human beings who become Orisha. And it goes down the line from Ogun to Shango to Orishanla, even to Oromila himself. Ejogbe tells us that it is human beings who distinguished themselves, and in so doing, they became memorialized, and they will never lapse into oblivion because of their legendary contribution. So these are the ones who, in spite of the changing conditions, in spite of how others of their time may have backed down or sat down or ran for cover, they were the ones who were able to maintain their position. They remained faithful to their mission and to their purpose. And in so doing, people remembered them and wanted to be like them. And that is what is bringing you to Orisha lifestyle today. That is what is drawing you into this tradition. Somehow when you saw Obatala, when you saw Oshun, when you saw Yemoja Oya, something inside you resonates and you say, that is where I belong. That's my path. That is my tradition. Right? And you were shown certain things and you went for it. You want the beads, you want the pots, you want the titles, you want the power, you want the prestige, you want the authority. You want someone to teach you. You want explanations given. You want everything in English. You want it to be fully accessible. You want your teachers and your leaders to have impeccable moral character. You want them to be patient and knowledgeable and skilled in every way imaginable. You want it all, which in and of itself isn't the worst of it. Where it becomes problematic for you is that you don't know how rare a combination all that is. To be able to get the beads, the pasta titles, respect the authority, to be taught, to be guided by someone of impeccable moral character with ultimate patience. Like all those things together is super duper rare, right? And if you don't understand how rare that is, then it'll be equally difficult for you to understand and accept what it means for you to qualify for that kind of privilege and that kind of access. You're talking about, getting access to the creme de la creme. You think you can just walk in and smile and say, I want this, I want that, I want to be exposed to the best of the best, or I'm entitled to this because I was pitiful and raggedy, because this is what happened to me, so you owe me all this access? It's not going to happen. Okay? And most importantly, I think that the thing that obstructs your ability to really get what you know you can have and what you can attain and experience, the biggest problem is that you don't have a solid grasp of your mission. Because if you really understood your mission, if you were aligned with your purpose, then you'd be willing to do more. Right? The little setbacks and the little difficulties and the little imperfections wouldn't be enough to deter you or dissuade you, even for a minute. Right? Because your mission would outweigh those difficulties every single time. You would not hesitate. Okay? So here, let me go a little bit further to help you understand what's happening. You have this drive. You have this innate need to align yourself with greatness, with eternal greatness, right? You live in a time that demands this greatness. The problems and the needs could never be more acute, right? You got the situation, you got the conditions, you've got the desire, but there's this gap, and that gap is a blindness. You're blind to what it takes to match, your desire with the needs of your time. And so when you come in contact with ritual specialists under these circumstances, because the teachers and the priests and the priestesses are also a part of this time. They're also living with the same difficulties that you are, right? The health problems, the economic problems, the legal problems, all the stuff that is a part of our time, the ways that we're under the gun. Your teachers and your priests and priestesses are also living in that. If it's not affecting them in their own life, it's affecting their spouses, it's affecting their children, it's affecting their cousins, their friends, right? They're a part of the time also. So what happens when they have something to offer? And I'll personalize it. I'll tell you, if I have something to offer and you want what I have to offer, but you don't know how rare my offering is. You haven't really fully assessed exactly what you're facing, how rare of a combination these offerings are. If you don't know what you really need to do to qualify to take advantage of the offerings, and you don't have a real solid reason for why you need to be a part of it, I'm going to tell you, it's easier for me to make you a customer than it is to make you a client. It's easier to sell you something. It's easier to sell you beads, pots, titles. It's easier to sell you those things than it is to make you a real client. See, if you're my client, my job is to work myself out of a job. My job is to find you wherever you are, assess it, implement some tools and some techniques and some services, and in a specified length of time, your problem is supposed to go away. That's what it means to have a client. You're not my client forever. I solve your problem, you move on. Maybe you bring me another problem, I'll help you solve that too. But when you see a Romula go kingdom to kingdom to kingdom to kingdom to kingdom, well, when the king calls Oromila because there's war, when Oromila leaves, the war is over. If the king calls Oromila because he can't have children, Oromila leaves when the palace is full of children. On and on and on. To have a client, it means to solve your problem. But it's easier to sell you things than it is to solve your problem. See, because Oromila may have had to stay in that kingdom for years. He may have had to stay for seasons, 3, 6, 9 months to solve that problem. So it's easier to sell you something. Here, take these beads, take this pot, wear this title, this is you, and then move on, than it is to make you a client. It's easier to make you a client than it is to make you an apprentice. It's easier to make you a client than an apprentice. And see, an apprentice, you can have even scores of clients, but your apprentices are going to become few because you're going to now not just do things for them, you're going to show them how to do things. My apprentices, I show them how to do things. Step 1, step 2, step 3. This is what you look for. This is how this feels. This is what you do when you find this combination of situations. It's easier to make you a client, come in and serve you, do what I need to do, make sure your problem is solved, than it is to teach you how to do it. And it's easier to make you an apprentice than it is to make you an Orisha. It's easier to show you how to do things than it is to help you transform your whole being, to elevate your vibration and your frequency to the level of eternal presence, which is Orisha. That's the hardest, right? And it's the hardest not only because of the technique that's involved, the amount of time and really delving into a person's life, but it's also more difficult because, that means preparing you to go far beyond where I am. It means looking at you and saying, how do I propel you to go far beyond anything that I've ever done? How do I look at you and say that you have the capacity to supersede my contribution and become deified? And walk you through that process to the best of my ability, season after season, year after year, decade after decade. Okay? So I'm just being transparent with you. These are things that you probably already, know. This, I'm not saying anything that should contradict your basic logic. But what it means is that you need to make up your mind. Do you want to be a customer? Do you want to be a client? Do you want to be an apprentice? Do you want to be an Orisha? What's your goal? And what are you willing to do? See, because the more you want, the more willing you have to be. If you want to attain Orisha status, then you got to be willing to do whatever it takes to attain Orisha status. Anybody who is committed to being truly superior knows that there are no shortcuts. There are no workarounds. There are no quick results. You've got to be willing to do the work whenever it needs to be done and however it is required in the situation that you face from one moment to the next. Superiority is never owned. It's never something that you attain once and for all. It's rented. You get to borrow it, and you got to pay the rent on it every single day. There's a super animated series called Afro Samurai. You may have seen it. I like it because it's based on the idea of samurai combat. There's this Afro Samurai. He's the greatest samurai ever. And he has the number 1 band. That means he's the deadliest killer of them all. There's a number 1, a number 2, and a number 3. And everybody wants number 1, of course. The key is there's some kind of a psychic power to the number 1 band. As soon as you kill the existing number 1 and you become number 1, all energy is focused on you. Now everybody is aiming to kill you as the number 1 samurai. You got the number 1 headband. Especially number 2. The one who has the number 2 headband is really aiming at you. But everybody wants the number 1. Right? And so every day, once you commit to seizing the number 1 headband, that means you're committed to a life of perpetual combat. You never get a day off. They're always bucking to take you down. Okay? And take that number 1 headband from you. Right? And so when you want to attain superior status, when you really want to elevate to that that level. It's not just about having the look. It's not just about the beads. It's not just the pots. It's not just the title. It's the willingness to do what it takes to maintain that status day after day after day for the rest of your life. Right? It's not an event. It's a lifestyle. It's waking up with a set of assumptions that will put you into motion no matter what you face. Right? It's paying the rent on superior status every single day. Now, within the Orisha Lifestyle Academy, what I am aspiring to do is to give you the conditioning, the reconditioning that will snatch you out of this blame game, that will snatch you out of this martyrdom syndrome, that will snatch you out of this perpetual race to the bottom where you're constantly trying to make sure that you're the most pitiful, to allowing you to face whatever adversity comes your way day after day, to defend your number one status under any circumstances and against any foe, day in, day out, season in, season out. It's about conditioning. And so what we do in the Orisha Lifestyle Academy is set you up with the techniques, with the materials, with the best practices that will make you proficient in terms of ritual, in terms of an understanding of the philosophy, the thought process, the psychology, the sacred text, and most importantly, the day-to-day application. How do you apply these teachings in your environment, in your home, in your workplace, in your community? How do you apply these every day? Independent of beads, pots, and titles, how do you make it happen for you and for the people who you're destined to serve on a day-to-day basis? And so, if you're one of those people who is truly interested in becoming superior and attaining the highest status possible for yourself, fulfilling your destiny in such a way that you become memorialized and a part of the eternal legacy of your family, of your lineage, of your people. If you are one of those people, then I am asking you to join the Orisha Lifestyle Academy today. Start working with us to live the medicine that will heal your life and heal the lives of those who you are destined to serve. Aboru aboye, aboshishe.
Lolo agbabudo mo, toka to